Hello, incredible story enthusiasts. Welcome to Story Room Lab. Before we delve into the story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss one of our dramatic episodes. Now, tell me in the comments below. Where are you watching this story unfold from? I love seeing our community grow across the globe. Now let's delve into the story. I remember the exact sound the porcelain plate made when it shattered against the terracotta tiles in the kitchen. A sharp, final crack that echoed the breaking of something delicate inside me. It wasn't the plate that mattered, though it was my favorite. A gift from Mark, a gentle blue piece we'd found at an artisan market during our second anniversary trip. What mattered was the reason I dropped it. I had just overheard the end of a hushed conversation, a conversation that wasn't meant for my ears, one that involved my mother, my fiancé, and the dark, simmering jealousy of my sister Lydia. I had been humming softly, preparing Mark's favorite lemon herb chicken for dinner, basking in the simple, comforting familiarity of our life together. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic clatter of my knife against the cutting board. Mark was supposedly in the study, taking a conference call, and Mother had dropped by unannounced, a habit I'd grown to tolerate, though not always appreciate. As I reached for the salt, I realized I hadn't seen her enter the kitchen. I paused, hearing the low murmur of voices coming from the sunroom, which was separated from the kitchen by only a thin sliding glass door, currently ajar. "You need to think practically, Mark." My mother's voice, usually a soothing velvet, was now clipped, commanding. "You're a rising executive. You need a partner who can handle the pressure, not crumble under it." My hand froze above the open spice rack. Crumble? Was she talking about my recent bout of anxiety after the layoff? Mark had been nothing but supportive. I took a silent, shallow breath and strained to hear his reply. "Mrs. Davies, Claire and I are happy. We're getting married in 3 months. I love her." His voice was firm, but there was an unsettling thread of defensiveness woven into his tone. "Love isn't everything, Mark. Stability is. Strength is," she countered, her voice dropping lower, forcing me to creep closer to the doorway, my heart now a frenzied bird in my chest. "Look at Lydia. She finishes a marathon, and then she comes home and closes a multi-million-dollar deal before lunch. She's driven. She's resilient. Claire is delicate, Mark. Fragile. She needs saving. Lydia is a partner. She's stronger and better for you." The words landed on me like physical blows. Delicate. Fragile. Needs saving. These were the labels my mother had secretly pinned on me my entire life. The comparison she'd never quite voiced but always implied through her boundless praise for Lydia. Lydia, the successful lawyer. Lydia, the athlete. Lydia, the one who never wept over a bad grade or called off work because the noise of the city felt too loud. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a mixture of shame and white-hot fury. It wasn't just the fact that she was undermining my relationship. It was the blatant, brutal way she was weaponizing my perceived weaknesses against my sister's manufactured perfection. And Mark. He hadn't immediately laughed it off. He hadn't defended me with the passion I knew he possessed. He was listening. A long silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then Mark spoke, and the sound of his voice, hesitant and low, was worse than the silence. "I know Lydia is impressive, Mrs. Davies. But—" "No buts, Mark," Mother cut him off with a chilling finality. "I know how the world works. I'm her mother. I know my daughter's capabilities. Claire is lovely, yes, but she will be a drain. Lydia will be an asset. Think about the legacy you're building. Think about the power of having a truly strong woman by your side." That's when the plate slipped. The noise was deafening. I didn't move. My mother and Mark were instantly at the doorway, their faces pale, caught in the beam of their own duplicity. My mother quickly composed herself, her expression shifting into a mask of worried innocence. "Claire. Darling. What was that? Are you all right?" She rushed forward, her hands reaching for me, but I stepped back, recoiling as if from a viper. Mark, however, looked genuinely horrified. His blue eyes, usually so warm and expressive, were wide with guilt. "Claire, listen, it's not what you think. Your mother was just discussing things." "Discussing things?" My voice was a shaky whisper, then it grew, fueled by the rage that finally broke through the shame. "You were discussing things about how my sister is stronger and better for you? About how I'm fragile and a drain?" I looked directly at my mother, her face now etched with cold calculation beneath the veneer of concern. "Did you put her up to this, Mother? Was this your idea of a little chat?" My mother's composure finally fractured. "Claire, I was only looking out for Mark. And for you. I want you both to be happy, but sometimes people are blind to what's truly right. Lydia is successful in every way. She and Mark share the same ambition. You need someone gentle, someone less demanding of success. Mark is not that man, darling." The sheer arrogance of her statement stole my breath. Not only was she attempting to steal my fiancé, but she was simultaneously insulting my character and my compatibility with the man I was supposed to marry in 12 weeks. I turned my attention to Mark. He was stammering, his usual eloquent charm replaced by panic. "Claire, I promise you," I told her. "No. I love you. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous and manipulative. You know I would never." "Would you never, Mark?" I interrupted, the pain a sharp, unbearable pressure behind my ribs. "Because you were standing there, listening to my mother tear me down and hold my sister up as the superior choice. You were listening to the woman who gave birth to me tell you I'm a burden, and you didn't tell her to leave. You didn't tell her to stop. You just entertained the possibility." His silence, a heavy, devastating absence of defense, was the only answer I needed. The love I felt for him, the foundation of trust we had built over 4 years, crumbled into dust around my feet, just like the blue plate. It wasn't the attraction to Lydia I feared. It was the seed of doubt my mother had expertly planted in his mind, the doubt about me. I looked at the shards of porcelain on the floor, then back at the two people who had just conspired to destroy my future. My mother's eyes were defiant, triumphant, a clear challenge. Mark's were filled with a regret that was already too late. I understood in that devastating moment that the battle wasn't just for Mark, but for my own dignity, and I was going to fight it. But first, I had to walk away from the immediate wreckage. "Get out," I said, my voice low and shaking, but laced with a terrifying new strength. "Both of you. Get out of my house." Mark tried to reach for me, but I flinched away. My mother, sensing the immediate victory was hers, simply gathered her purse, adjusted her expensive silk scarf, and gave Mark a brief, knowing look before gliding out. Mark lingered, his face etched with genuine agony, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of his passive betrayal. But I just stood there, arms wrapped tightly around myself, refusing to meet his gaze. "Please, Claire. Let me explain," he pleaded. "There's nothing to explain," I said, finally looking up, my eyes dry, my heart cold. "She offered you a better, stronger choice, and you entertained the thought long enough for me to hear it. That's all I need to know. Go." He didn't move for another minute, his face a roadmap of internal conflict. Then, with a defeated sigh, he picked up his jacket and left, the closing of the front door a quiet, mournful sound that sealed my fate. I was left alone in the wreckage, with the scent of lemon herb chicken and the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. My mother had done more than just suggest a switch. She had begun a campaign, and I knew with chilling certainty that this was only the first shot fired. She truly believed Lydia was stronger and better, and now she had made Mark believe it too. The next morning, the sun felt like a cruel spotlight, illuminating the sharp reality of the previous night. I had spent hours cleaning up the porcelain shards, the act of sweeping and mopping a grim, therapeutic ritual that did nothing to soothe the laceration in my heart. Mark had sent 3 texts and left 2 voicemails, each one pleading for a chance to talk, to explain that he was simply being polite, that he was caught off guard by Mother's audacity. I deleted the texts without reading them fully and ignored the calls. The problem wasn't what he said. It was the space he allowed my mother's poison to inhabit. He entertained the comparison. He saw the calculation in my mother's eyes, and instead of defending the woman he claimed to love, he paused. That pause was his betrayal. My sister, Lydia, called me at 9 a.m. sharp, right before her daily power yoga session, as if checking a box on her perfect itinerary. I answered, knowing that avoiding her would only delay the inevitable confrontation. "Claire? What on earth happened last night?" Her voice was smooth, a practiced blend of concern and detached professionalism. It always sounded like she was negotiating a contract, even when discussing family trauma. "You know what happened, Lydia?" I replied flatly, staring out the window at the neighbor's carefully manicured rose bushes. They looked offensively cheerful. Mother was very vague. She just said she had an intense discussion with Mark about his future and that you overreacted and asked them both to leave. Lydia said, the word overreacted delivered with a subtle dismissive sigh. She told Mark that you are stronger and better for him. That I'm fragile and a drain. That's what happened, I stated, forcing the ugly truth into the air. Silence stretched for a moment. A long telling silence that wasn't one of shock, but of contemplation. Then, Lydia cleared her throat. Claire, you know how Mother is. She's dramatic. She always says things like that. She was talking about marriage, Lydia. My marriage. And she was talking about you, I retorted, gripping the phone tighter. And you know what? Mark listened. He didn't shut her down. He considered it. Lydia's response was not the denial I desperately needed to hear. It was worse. It was a concession of possibility, wrapped in a veneer of superior logic. Well, maybe she has a point, Lydia said, her tone suddenly shifting to that of a mentor offering unsolicited, yet insightful career advice. Look, Claire, you're sweet. You're kind. You're creative. But Mark is going to be running a major corporation by 40. He needs a partner who operates on that same level of aggression and ambition. You haven't been doing well since the layoff. You're sensitive. Mark is a shark. He needs another shark beside him, not, well, you. My breath hitched. It was the same assessment, only this time, it came from my sister, not through my mother's insidious proxy, but directly from her own mouth. The betrayal felt complete, a circle closing around me. The years of unspoken rivalry, over grades, over attention, over my mother's approval, had finally boiled over into the theft of my entire future. Are you serious right now, Lydia? I whispered, my voice thick with disbelief and hurt. You are validating this? You would genuinely consider going after my fiancé, 3 months before our wedding, just because Mother said you're better? I'm not going after anyone, she said, sounding offended, but the offense was thin, like cheap veneer. But Mark is a very eligible man. And yes, our professional lives align perfectly. We think the same way about finance, power, and strategy. You and Mark are cute, but you're not a power couple. We would be. There was a seductive undertone in her voice, a thrill of possibility she couldn't quite hide. It was the sound of someone realizing a long-coveted prize was suddenly within reach. So, you're just going to step in? You're going to let Mother destroy my relationship so you can claim the prize? Don't you have any loyalty to me? Lydia scoffed. Loyalty? Claire, this isn't about loyalty. This is about logic and destiny. Mark needs a strong partner to ascend, and you, frankly, are struggling to keep your head above water. Mother sees it, I see it, and Mark is starting to see it. If he chooses me, it's not theft. It's a mutual recognition of a superior fit. It's evolutionary. Her cold pragmatism sliced through me more deeply than Mark's hesitation. I had always assumed Mark was unequivocally mine, but hearing Lydia discuss their potential pairing as an evolutionary and superior fit made me realize the sheer magnetism of their combined ambition. They were cut from the same unforgiving cloth of success, while I, the artist and the dreamer, represented a comfortable, but ultimately, soft destination. You can take your superior fit and shove it, Lydia, I spat, my voice finally finding its hardness. Stay away from him. This is toxic, manipulative garbage, and you know it. Be careful, Claire. You're emotional, she warned, sounding suddenly pleased, as if my anger only proved her point about my fragility. If you push Mark away with accusations and drama, you'll only be driving him into the arms of someone who offers him calm and understanding. I'm just telling you the truth. If he comes to me, I won't turn him away. Mark deserves the best, and if he decides that's me, well, then it is. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone, my hand trembling. Lydia wasn't merely complicit. She was an active participant in this coup. She saw Mark not as my fiancé, but as a prestigious appointment, a professional asset she was qualified for, and I was not. My mother had planted the seed of doubt, and Lydia was now watering it with validation and the lure of a power partnership. That afternoon, Mark arrived unannounced. He found me sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by bridal magazines and wedding checklists, which now seemed like morbid relics. Claire, please. We need to talk about what happened, he said, standing awkwardly near the threshold, his handsome face etched with fatigue. There's nothing to talk about, Mark, I said, folding a glossy page featuring an intricate wedding dress. I heard what I needed to hear, and then Lydia confirmed it. She thinks she's better for you. She thinks you two are a power couple. And you know what? I think you might be starting to agree with her. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. No, I don't agree with her, Claire. I was just shocked by your mother. She was so forceful. She kept talking about stability and your mental health. My mental health is none of her business, and it is certainly not a weapon she gets to use to sell my sister to you. I slammed the magazine shut. Did you tell her that? Did you tell her I am strong enough to be your wife? Did you defend me, Mark, or did you just let her paint me as the fragile artist who would slow down the mighty CEO? He looked down at his shoes, his silence again speaking volumes. I told her I love you, Claire. But yes, I listened. I won't lie. When she started talking about Lydia's drive and how similar our career trajectories are, it made me pause. Just for a moment. But a moment is all it took for her to see an opening. A moment is all it takes to lose trust, I whispered. And you gave her that moment. Now, Lydia is waiting. She's ready to offer you the superior fit. Go to her, Mark. Go find your shark. I don't want a partner who needs to be convinced I'm worthy, and I certainly don't want a mother and sister who are actively undermining my life. He tried one last desperate plea, listing all the wonderful memories we shared, the future we planned, but his defense was weak, diluted by his previous passive acceptance. I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it wide. I need you to leave, Mark. And I need you to decide who you truly want, but you need to do it without me waiting in the wings. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I held my stance, cold and resolute. He walked out, and as the door clicked shut, I knew I had done more than just end an argument. I had opened the door for Lydia to walk right in. The battle lines were drawn. It was me, the fragile woman, against my mother, my sister, and the ambition of the man I loved. The ensuing 2 weeks were a study in emotional vacuum and agonizing visibility. Mark and I were officially on a break, a euphemism that felt thin and childish given the magnitude of the betrayal. I had returned his key, deactivated our shared accounts, and removed all trace of him from the apartment, creating a clinical, sterile environment that was supposed to foster healing but only amplified the crushing loneliness. The wedding planner had been put on hold, the deposits lost, but the financial loss was nothing compared to the daily loss of my future. Meanwhile, the dynamic between Mark and Lydia shifted from a theoretical possibility to a horrifying, tangible reality. A spectacle I was forced to witness, thanks to my mother's masterful orchestration. My mother, seizing the opportunity one had inadvertently provided by pushing Mark away, launched her full-scale campaign. She ensured Mark and Lydia were constantly in each other's orbit, presenting these encounters as accidental or professional. Mark's corporate law firm needed a specialist in intellectual property. Lydia, of course, was the best in the city. A high-profile charity gala Mark was obligated to attend needed an escort. My mother happened to mention that Lydia was free, having just broken up with her own, less ambitious beau. The photographs started appearing online with insidious regularity. Not from Mark, who was still sending me remorseful, unanswered messages, but from Lydia's meticulously curated social media profile. They weren't romantic poses. They were, as Lydia had so chillingly predicted, snapshots of a power couple. One photo showed them side by side at a business dinner. Lydia in a severe, stunning emerald dress, Mark in a sharp tux, both laughing over a shared document. The caption read, "Discussing strategies for Q4. Nothing better than aligning ambition." Another picture was taken at a weekend hike, not an intimate trail, but a challenging mountain ascent. Lydia, effortlessly strong, stood slightly ahead of Mark, beaming triumphantly. Caption, "Pushing limits. Grateful for a partner who understands the grind." Every post was a calculated message, a subtle declaration that the qualities my mother lauded, strength, ambition and resilience, were exactly what Mark was now seeking and finding in abundance with my sister. They weren't falling in love with romantic poetry or quiet comforts. They were connecting over spreadsheets and adrenaline, over the cold, hard geometry of shared success. I tried to talk to my mother, to appeal to any shred of maternal empathy, but she remained relentlessly pragmatic. She came to my apartment, her eyes sweeping over the half-packed boxes and the empty spaces Mark had occupied, and sighed with a theatrical air of martyrdom. "Claire, you brought this on yourself," she said, folding her arms. "You're making this difficult. They are simply compatible. You pushed him away because of a small argument, And now he is finding companionship with someone who doesn't constantly look for drama. Drama? You told my fiancé I was a drain on him and offered him my sister. That's not drama, mother, that's sabotage. I argued, my voice tight with desperation. It was a suggestion, darling, and Mark took it seriously because deep down he knew I was right, she countered smoothly, picking up a framed photo of Mark and me from the mantel, a goofy picture from a beach trip, and setting it face down. Lydia doesn't cry over spilt milk or a job loss. She doesn't let her emotions dictate her productivity. Mark needs that focus. You are sweet, but you are not strong enough for his world. I watched her turn the picture over, and a deep, chilling realization settled over me. My mother didn't just want Mark for Lydia. She genuinely believed that by engineering this switch, she was improving Mark's life. In her warped, hyper-competitive view of the world, she was helping Mark ascend by removing the perceived liability of my gentle nature. Her motives were rooted in a strange toxic love for Mark's success, which she saw as a reflection of her own ability to pick a winner. The final blow came 3 weeks after I asked Mark to leave. I was attending a small gallery opening, the first time I had stepped out publicly, hoping to reclaim some sense of my own identity. I saw them immediately. Mark and Lydia were standing in the center of the room, looking breathtakingly polished. Lydia's hand rested casually on Mark's forearm, her body angled toward his with an intimacy that was both proprietary and undeniable. They weren't just colleagues. They were a unit. My heart lurched, a painful, physical spike. I tried to slip away, but Mark spotted me. He excused himself and walked towards me, his face a mixture of guilt and a strange, excited nervousness. "Claire," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "I'm glad you're out. You look good." "Mark," I replied curtly. "Are you happy now? Did my mother's vision of superior fit work out for you?" He sighed, running a hand over his tie. "She's impressive, Claire. Everything your mother said about her focus and her drive? It's all true. We've been spending a lot of time together, professionally and socially. There's a chemistry that I can't deny. A connection based on mutual understanding of how hard you have to work to get ahead. And what about the connection based on love and comfort and the 4 years we built?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked back at Lydia, who was watching us with an expression of cool, nonchalant ownership. When his eyes returned to mine, they were filled with regret, but also with a decisive finality. "That life, Claire, was comfortable. But this is a partnership that feels like it can conquer the world. Lydia is exactly who your mother said she was, resilient, strong, and always moving forward. She makes me better at my job. She doesn't need me to slow down for her, and she never asks me to settle." The words were crushing, an explicit confirmation that my softness, my vulnerability, the very things he had once claimed to cherish, were now considered fatal flaws. "So the wedding is off then," I stated, not as a question, but as a final epitaph to our relationship. He nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry, Claire. I wish this hadn't happened this way. But Lydia and we are moving forward. She understands my life, and frankly, she challenges me in a way you never did. She's the strength I need." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply absorbed the blow and straightened my spine. Looking past him, I met Lydia's gaze across the room. Her eyes held a mixture of pity and smug vindication. She had won. My mother's dark prophecy had been fulfilled. "Go back to her, Mark," I said, a strange calm washing over me. "I don't want a man who chooses professional ambition over emotional depth. I don't want a partner who defines strength as being devoid of feeling. You both deserve each other. You and my sister are the perfect power couple. Enjoy conquering the world together." I walked away from him, leaving the gallery and the sight of their perfect, powerful coupling behind. I felt lighter, severed from a life I now realized was tainted by conditional love. My mother had convinced Mark that Lydia was stronger and better, and in doing so, she had freed me from a relationship built on a foundation of shaky validation. The pain was still immense, but a new cold clarity had begun to replace the confusion. I was alone, but I was finally free from the shadow of comparison. The months following Mark's official transition from my fiancé to my sister's partner were characterized by a necessary, brutal isolation. I changed my phone number, blocked my mother and Lydia on all social platforms, and even moved to a smaller apartment across the city. I needed to cut the tumor out completely to stop the poison from spreading. The noise of their success, the engagement announcement, the fawning media coverage of the New York power couple, the lavish details of their planned wedding, was a constant, ambient hum I had to actively mute. I didn't seek external validation. I sought oblivion and then, slowly, reconstruction. My mother's cruel words had lodged deep. Fragile, delicate, a drain. For so long, I had believed that strength meant Lydia's iron will, her relentless drive, her inability to be shaken by emotional turmoil. I realized I was equating emotional resilience with emotional absence. To prove them wrong, I decided I wouldn't become more like Lydia. I would become unapologetically more like myself. I threw myself back into my art, the creative work that Mark had always considered a charming hobby and Lydia dismissed as unproductive. I painted the betrayal, the crushing pressure of comparison, and the slow, painful process of healing. I poured the raw, messy truth of my vulnerability onto the canvas. The result was not polished or powerful in the corporate sense, but it was real. My old friend, Sarah, a sculptor with a discerning eye, saw my new collection. "Claire," she said, her voice hushed as she looked at a piece titled The Broken Plate, a chaotic assembly of blues and sharp reds. "This isn't just good. It's devastating. It's honest. It has a voice." Through Sarah, I connected with a small, independent gallery focused on emotional and narrative-driven art. They loved the collection. They saw the searing honesty in my work, the strength it took to expose such deep personal pain. They offered me my first solo show. The irony was not lost on me. While Mark and Lydia were building a life defined by external power and financial conquest, I was quietly building a life defined by internal authority. The planning for the gallery show, titled Delicate Strength, was consuming. I managed the logistics, negotiated the contract, and handled the PR, tasks my mother would have insisted I was too delicate to manage. I was terrified, yes, but I pushed through the fear. I learned that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. One afternoon, I received a curious email. It was an invitation to a significant industry event, not for art, but for my previous career field, tech communications. I had ignored the job search for months, paralyzed by my mother's assessment that I would crumble. Attached to the invitation was a message from the company's CEO, a prominent figure named Ethan Vance. "Claire, I saw your work when you were consulting for former company name 3 years ago. Your proposals weren't just technically sound. They were empathetic and intuitive. We are launching a new division focused on ethical AI and social impact. A space where vulnerability and nuance are assets, not liabilities. Your unique perspective is exactly what we need. I understand you've been through a lot, but I'm building a team that values people who can feel deeply. We don't want sharks. We want depth. Please consider meeting me." I read the word vulnerability, not as an accusation, but as an asset. It was a complete inversion of my mother's philosophy. Mark and Lydia were celebrated for their hard-edged ambition. Ethan Vance was seeking a different kind of power, the power of empathy and humanity. The meeting with Ethan was transformative. He was nothing like Mark. Calm, observant, and deeply respectful. He didn't view my past struggles as weakness. He viewed my ability to weather them and emerge creatively intact as a mark of true strength. He offered me a senior position, not based on who I knew or whose shadow I stood in, but based on the unique, quiet effectiveness of my mind. I took the job. As the weeks passed, I found my footing. I thrived in an environment that valued thoughtful communication over aggressive maneuvering. My professional success was not defined by external wealth, but by internal fulfillment. I felt a core strength growing, a resilience rooted in self-acceptance rather than constant self-improvement for someone else's benefit. The climax of this period came on the night of my Delicate Strength Gallery opening. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by my creations, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, radiating a quiet confidence I had never possessed when I was standing beside Mark. Then they walked in. Mark and Lydia. They looked exactly as they did in the society photos. Perfect, coordinated, and expensive. Mark was still handsome, but his expression when he looked at me was startled, almost hesitant. Lydia, however, was radiating the kind of possessive confidence she always wore. My mother, who had likely forced them to attend, approached me first. She looked around the bustling gallery, seeing the crowd, the press, and the red-soled dots appearing next to my pieces. "This is ambitious, Claire," she conceded grudgingly. But your professional life is much more important than this little venture. Actually, Mother, I said, meeting her eyes with calm defiance, this is my professional life. And so is my new job, which requires the empathy you told me was a weakness. It seems the world values a different kind of strength than the one you were selling. Before she could rally, Mark approached me, Lydia hovering close behind him. Claire, Mark started, his voice a low, rough rumble. I saw your announcement about the Vance position. I know Ethan. That's a huge deal. Congratulations. Thank you, Mark. It's a team that values my whole self, not just the parts that serve as a polished accessory, I replied, my voice steady. He seemed to flinch. Then, he looked at my artwork, specifically at the broken plate. He saw the literal fragments of the past, now permanently set in a jarring, beautiful mosaic. The art? It's intense, he murmured. It's strong. Lydia stepped in, her arm looped tightly through his. It's very emotional, Claire. Very personal. We should probably stick to the corporate art world, darling. It's less messy. Messy is real, Lydia, I countered, looking at her not with anger, but with genuine pity. You convinced Mark that I was weak because I had feelings. But my feelings are what made this success possible. You have a very successful fiancé, a successful career, but tell me, Lydia, when you look in the mirror, do you know who you are without the ambition? Or are you just wearing the strength Mother prescribed for you? Lydia's smile faltered for the first time. Her eyes narrowed, but she couldn't formulate a sharp comeback. She was confronted with something she couldn't negotiate, dominate, or market. The authenticity of emotional truth. Mark looked from her composed, slightly panicked face, back to my serene, successful one. He saw the strength he had abandoned. My mother convinced him that Lydia was stronger and better. But standing there, self-made and wholly independent, surrounded by the proof of my own hard-won resilience, I finally knew the truth. I was the strongest one of all. The confrontation at the gallery opening was my final act of severance. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but quiet and absolute. I didn't need to fight for Mark. I simply needed to demonstrate that the life I was building, rooted in self-knowledge and empathy, was more profound than the one they were constructing on a shared scaffolding of corporate ambition. After that night, I never actively sought news of them, but in the tight circle of our city's elite, their story was unavoidable. For a while, the narratives confirmed my mother's vision. Mark and Lydia had a magnificent, widely publicized wedding, a glittering testament to the merging of two powerful entities. They bought a penthouse with panoramic city views and were often featured in business magazines, always impeccably dressed, always talking about their aligned vision. They were, undeniably, the power couple. But behind the gilded facade, the fractures began to show. I heard the first whispers through Sarah, who occasionally ran into my mother at charity events. Lydia is working 80 hours a week, Sarah reported over lunch one day, stirring her tea slowly. She took on a major partnership with Mark's firm, and apparently, the office dynamic is tense. They never stop working. It's competitive, even at home. Of course it is, I murmured, staring into my own reflection in the window glass. Lydia doesn't know how to exist without competition, and Mark was taught to value only the climb. The whispers grew louder. Their relationship, built on the premise of mutual challenge and shared drive, lacked the crucial element of simple, unconditional comfort. They were constantly challenging each other, pushing boundaries, and competing for dominance, mistaking friction for passion. The synergy my mother had so admired turned out to be a relentless, draining rivalry. Then there was my mother. Her initial triumph had faded, replaced by an agitated, nagging anxiety. She had succeeded in creating the perfect high-powered couple, but she hadn't created a happy daughter. Lydia, now fully invested in her role as the formidable Mrs. Mark, had little time or patience for my mother's constant interference. She was no longer seeking my mother's approval. She had achieved the status my mother coveted, and now she wielded that power against her. One evening, my mother called me from an unrecognizable number. Her voice, usually so controlled, was shaky. Claire, I need to talk to you. I know you're busy with your gallery success and that wonderful new job, but... What is it, Mother? I asked, bracing myself. She choked back a small sob, a sound I hadn't heard from her since I was a child. Lydia, she's cut me off. Completely. She said I was too much of a distraction. She said that if I couldn't contribute to her focus, I needed to stay out of her life. The irony was a bitter pill. My mother had used my perceived fragility as a weapon to drive Mark toward Lydia's strength, and now, that very strength was being used to discard her. The cold pragmatism she had instilled in Lydia was now turning against its creator. I tried to tell her that I was only looking out for her, for the marriage. She just said, "I'm your project now, Mother, and you're a failed part of the execution." My mother sounded lost, confused that her masterful scheme had resulted in her own isolation. I felt a pang of sympathy, but not forgiveness. "You taught her that strength is the rejection of anything soft, Mother. You taught her that people are either assets or liabilities. You were an asset when you were selling her to Mark. Now that they are married, you are a liability to her focus." She learned her lesson well. I gently ended the call, knowing that the damage my mother inflicted was finally rebounding upon her. The inevitable denouement of Mark and Lydia's high-pressure union came just under 2 years after their wedding. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic explosion, but a cold, mutual collapse. The divorce announcement cited irreconcilable professional and personal differences. They couldn't agree on investment strategy, on corporate mergers, or even on where to spend their limited time off. Every interaction was a negotiation, every discussion a strategy session. They had built a spectacular corporation together, but they had failed to build a home. The very thing my mother had convinced Mark was his salvation, the superior fit of shared ambition, turned out to be the acid that dissolved their bond. I saw Mark one last time, months after the divorce was finalized. He was attending a major industry conference where my company was presenting. He caught me alone in the hallway, looking tired and noticeably less polished than I remembered. "Claire," he said quietly. "You were right." I waited, crossing my arms. Lydia and I. We were perfect on paper. We were two strong forces. But there was no peace. No refuge. We were too busy trying to be the strongest person in the room that we forgot how to be two people in love. He paused, his gaze regretful. "Your mother convinced me I needed a shark. I chose the sharpness, and I destroyed the comfort." He looked at me then, truly looked, taking in my calm demeanor and the confidence that now settled around me like a natural cloak. "You have a different kind of strength, Claire. It's quiet. It lasts. You didn't need me to validate you, and you certainly didn't need to crush others to rise. That's what true strength is." I didn't offer him forgiveness, nor did I claim victory. "I wish you peace, Mark," I said simply. "I'm glad you finally understand." I walked away from him, my steps light. I realized the true victory wasn't seeing their collapse, but recognizing the resilience I had found in their absence. My mother's betrayal had been the catalyst for my liberation. She told Mark my sister was stronger and better. She convinced him. She lost me a fiancé, but she gained me a true self. Mark was gone. Lydia was busy building her next empire. My mother was alone, reflecting on the cold cost of her ambition. And I, the woman they had labeled fragile and delicate, was now thriving, strong in the way that mattered, whole, kind, and authentically powerful.